Welcome to another episode of Just One More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey, Lee, Carrie, and Kurt.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
You can find us online at justonmorefix.com or on Twitter at justonmorefix. If you like us, head over to Apple Podcasts or Google Play and give us a rating and a comment. In this episode, we're going to talk about historical accuracy. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Kier.
And I'm Alyssa from In Defense Of, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the one you're listening to now.
The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts and guests.
Be sure to check out all the other podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And get ready, because geekiness begins in 3,
2.
1.
Welcome to another episode of Just One More Fix. Couple quick announcements. First off, obviously you guys heard for the first time in almost, I think, 4 or 5 months. I think we have more than just me and Lacey on the podcast today. So
That
we
wasn't
have
meant to be shaming you at all. It wasn't like a
everyone around the table again for the first time in quite a while.
I have felt shame every single week where I'm like, oh, I didn't get out there.
So there's 5 of us here on the mics today. So hopefully we're going to work hard to try and not talk over each other too much. So hopefully this comes out pretty well for you guys. But we're excited to have everybody back here on the mics for what hopefully is going to be an awesome podcast. Second announcement is, do you want to do this or do you want me to?
So Evil Hat Games is a company that I was going to try and buy some games from because I work at a high school and we have a library club where we do role-playing games. And I sent an email off to them to figure out how we could buy their games using a check. And they sent me Mr. Hicks sent me back an email from Evil Hat Games that said, you know what, we support what you do because I try to train GMs. That's my number one thing. If I've got 10 players, that's great, but I want to send more game masters out into the world because that's what keeps the games rolling. And they sent me a box of some of their best stuff. Dresden Files, Fate Core, Fate Accelerated, all this sort of good stuff, gratis, basically. So I'm telling you what, if you were thinking about buying an Evil Hat game, you need to go out there and buy it right now, maybe buy 2 or 3. And we thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts because it's awesome.
Right on. Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was very cool. When you told me, I was like, that is just amazing. And I like to support people and companies that are kind of in line with doing that and helping grow the hobby, which is part of the reason we all are doing this podcast anyway, I guess. And it's really...
Yeah, I noticed I didn't get paid for my last 10 episodes, and then I'm like, wait a minute, this is a hobby.
Right. Well, you know. So, big thanks to Evil Hat Productions and specifically Fred Hicks over there for helping...
Train future GMs.
Yeah, train future GMs and expose them to story-based games and not just regular old run-of-the-mill D&D. It's cool to see... other games that don't have quite as big of a reach get out there and get exposed to some newer players.
Oh yeah, it's cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very cool. Right on. So you guys heard that we are going to talk about historical accuracy in gaming, and I kind of sprung this one on everybody because I thought it would be fun to where we didn't actually have a whole lot of discussion about it beforehand because I wanted to just sort of
ambush us with it.
Well, catch everybody like stream of conscious, you know, about how you really think about it, right? So, little background. There are several people in the room who...
Wait. Can you just go around the table and ask everybody what their connection is with history in general?
That'll work.
You should probably start with Kurt.
Okay. So...
My name is Kurt Willer, and I have a bachelor's degree and about 99% of a master's degree in history from Illinois State University, focusing in early modern and late medieval history, specifically the history of religion.
I am Carrie. You know me, but I teach social studies at a high school, and I have my bachelor's in history and teaching and social science.
I feel like in high school they shouldn't call it social studies anymore. I think it should be...
It depends how they class you. Yeah. I always considered myself a historian, but...
Right.
I also teach other classes that are not history.
Right. Cool.
I'm married to someone that
No, you've got a background in literature, which is
I'm most of the way through an English degree, which requires reading lots of Victorian literature. Victorian romance.
Is that like a degree in historical fiction or
Fake history.
His degree in historical fiction.
it's the way writers.
The vast majority of the stuff that we have from history is the written word. Thank you.
I've got to say, if I was given the choice between reading a lot of Victorian romance and a lot of historical fiction, I think I might choose the Victorian romance because there is some.
No way.
No, if
Not
you
even
no
close.
no, if you really look and dig deep into historical fiction, there is a lot that is like beyond terrible.
Give me Ken Follett over Jane Austen any day. Any day.
The thing is, you can't.
Oh,
choose.
Mr. Darcy.
It's a very wide spectrum, and some of it is really bad.
I'm a little concerned that I'm working on something with history in my
Does
hobby.
George Martin qualify as a historical
But
figure?
maybe
No.
that's important.
No, it has to be like an actual historical event
That's
where you
historical
applied. Not even. No.
It's like the Battle of the Five Armies, like historical.
yeah, no.
Dang it.
so I like science. I once got a D in history class, and I
Hey,
make
no, D's get degrees. All right, you passed.
I make Kurt roll his eyes a lot when I talk about history.
Sometimes I feel like they're going to roll out. I mean,
Actually-
it's just like. And now you save people's lives for a living.
And now I save people's lives.
Well, at least you found your niche. It was
As it turns
like
out,
science.
you don't need to historically know why CPR is a thing. You just do it.
Right. This is also true. Why do we do this? I don't know. We've always have.
Just have to know the beat of staying alive, right?
That's-
Isn't that how that works?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
Although
Little John's Get Low.
that's my
Or no,
favorite thing.
Yeah, Get Low.
Yeah.
That's the one.
It's a hilarious song. And it's like a club song, and it's at 100 beats per minute. So I found it, and I was like,
How
share
many
this with
clubs do
everybody.
I go? Okay,
But
I
it's,
think
it's
we've answered
everywhere.
that
You can't
question.
escape it. I guarantee you've heard it. If you at the high school, I will guarantee you've heard it. So anyway,
I'll play it for you when we're done.
Very good.
So-
It'll be magical.
Is that a threat?
What's James's connection?
so I don't really have any formal education in high school, but I
Born in
read
79.
too much. I was born in 1979, so I have a relevant opinion there.
Wait, he goes by podcast. Were you not there during introductions?
Yeah, our first episode, I said I was 29, not even close. Anyway, but I don't know. I've had a healthy love of history, and I read too much, and I just find weird trivia and weird stories to be super
and why?
interesting. And that's actually what inspires a lot of my gaming is all those weird moments in history of things. And I've come around to the idea that I think that placing things in the real world in terms of gaming is actually the better way to go to get buy-in from people. It's a whole other discussion we can have. But so I don't have any formal education, but just 29 years of
Yeah.
history addiction
Right.
Screwing around,
and whatever.
yeah,
So I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to actually do anything.
Reading onion headlines.
So,
you're
okay,
good.
so here's my question for you guys: is that, and this is the reason why I wanted to have you here, Lacey, as well, is because I know you don't really have an interest in history, but like how much?
Important.
I like how two other people aren't historians, but you singled me out.
Well, you say you hate it, you don't like it at all.
It's true.
So,
Yeah.
but like in terms of what got me thinking about this is we're in the process of starting a Colonial Gothic game, and I'm starting to try and put it together and plots I want to run and whatever. And I thought, I learned a lot about the signing of the Constitution in history class, but like the colonial era, as far as like how life was for people, it just kind of gets mushed together as there's pilgrims and then there's a civil
They
war.
didn't live very long. A lot of people got yellow fever and then pooped themselves
Right.
to death.
What I'm
I would like to say that I probably know as much about colonial history as your average non-American.
well, there you go. So,
Since 70.
I'm just saying,
Wow,
if
that's
you're marketing
probably
this game
true.
outside of the
That
US,
is
I'm
probably
right
true.
there.
well, so I began to think like, where can I go to find resources to learn about what was happening in not like historic events, but like what life was like for the average person during the colonial era.
Oh, God,
right?
that's easy.
So, but then I also
ask me.
began to think, like,
Ask
Who's
Carrie.
there, man?
Oh, yeah, I'm old enough.
Wikipedia.
how
Oh, don't make me come over there. Do not make me come over there.
how much how important is it to you that you have things to be accurate in that way in your tabletop games?
It depends on the game.
Depends on the audience, because here's the thing. I kind of like the 18th century, especially the late 18th century when you're talking about that late Enlightenment period. You're talking about the beginning of the era of the modern revolutions, which is going to last from in Europe from 1789 through the 1850s. It's important, I think, that we have the spirit, but again, it's going to be completely different. If I'm playing this table here with these people, it's going to be completely different than if I'm playing, let's say, for some reason, if I had my social studies department. I'm going to have to really turn up that game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So-
as with anything, it's with the audience.
Can I run a Colonial Gothic game for your history department?
You can try. But the problem is that just the spirit of the age, knowing what's going on, is important. I mean, what are the big social and economic things that are going on throughout the world in the late 18th century? I mean, it's important to know the history of economics a little bit because it's the era of giant state monopolies. It's the era of slavery. It's the era of absolutism. Until 1789, it is literally the culmination of when Louis XIV, I think it was, said, "I am the state," more or
but
less. It's like a thing.
But how important is the accuracy to you when you actually come to the table?
I don't know if it's entirely super important that it's ultra accurate because we have a point of departure. I mean, unless we're playing an ultra realistic game like Colonial Gothic, there's magic and stuff. And
Well, yes, but there's several. Okay, using this as part of the premise for it, there are several different levels you can run the game at.
Yeah.
Kind of like 3 different levels. One is like magic is wide open and everywhere. One is it's like kind of subtle, and then one is like Vampire the Masquerade is like hidden and we don't talk about it.
So can I ask you just for like 1 second? Did you see the movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter?
I did. Awesome movie.
That was
So,
totally
that was my
how it
next thing.
happened.
Was I was going to ask you, how did you feel about that movie?
I thought that's how they used to tell history back in the day before we actually had things like accuracy. And no, I mean, you would
more of
take
a
your
myth as
heroes,
opposed-
yeah, and you would blow. You took out 10,000 men, and it depends. Like when we went going all the way back to an earlier episode when we set expectations, is this a heroic, over the top, crazy adventure? Where again, magic's out in the open, or is this a magic like Strange and Norrell, if you're familiar with that series or book, where it's just coming back? I think it all has to do with setting those expectations. Like if we're playing an ultra realistic game,
Okay, no, so well, hang on. I will concede the fact that if you're playing an ultra realistic game, then accuracy is important. Okay. But what I'm talking about is the Jonathan Strange is a great example of it, where that game that storyline takes place in a specific time period, right? And while Colonial Gothic would be another example of it, where it's not necessarily. I mean, clearly it's not reality because there's magic, right?
Yeah.
But the question is when you're playing a game and it's taking place in France and England in this time period. Obviously, you're going to have huge points of departure because of magic existing, but is it important to you that the small details are correct about how people lived and like
Okay.
things that they used, weapons that they have?
What was Lee going to say earlier?
I don't know. I forgot.
Oh.
But yes,
Carrie's got
the
something.
details are important because the details sell the world. It's not important that the players concede those details. It's important that the GM does.
Okay, so I have just finished reading the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell book, and there are footnotes. That historical universe is completely written in and accurate.
Yeah.
And it is amazing.
It's
and
great, yeah.
beautiful, and I want more of it. However, that being said, as much as I love history, I don't need accuracy in my game. I'm more concerned with how my character is feeling at that time. So if you give me the wrong disease happening, I'm good with that.
Is it going to be like one of those death by 1,000 cuts things? So you don't care if the disease is wrong, but if the disease is wrong, and I also gave you the wrong kind of pistol, and
That's where I'm going.
just put us through the Industrial Revolution, and that shouldn't actually be a thing right now. And also, by the way, Woodrow Wilson is president.
None of that would bother me. For the
okay,
sole
Woodrow
reason-
Wilson. I mean, that's just okay. That's a bridge too far right there. I can't cross it.
Woodrow Wilson is the Queen of England.
For the sole reason that the world you're creating for me is the reality that I'm in when I play your game.
But
It doesn't matter
when
if
we
it's the
start the
first
game, though, and we're laying it out, and you're supposed to be in this seemingly realistic world, and things are way, way off, then I think it becomes an issue. And let me give you an example, okay? In Saving Private, like assuming that our games are modeled after some other form of media, whether it's TV or movies or whatever, Saving Private Ryan. You know the guy who's in the bell tower, the sharpshooter, right? The rifle he's using isn't the Army issue sharpshooter rifle, sniper rifle. It's actually the Marine version of it that was never seen any action in the European theater, right? It was only in the Pacific theater because it was a Marine weapon, okay? But the reason the movie decided to use it is because it looked more snipery than the Army version of the rifle. And they made that choice as
It's an aesthetic choice.
an aesthetic artistic choice, right? So that at that level, I think that's 100% okay because it makes it look better. It makes it feel like it's supposed to.
Well, I
okay,
mean,
It's
that
the same
level-
argument to me is the Braveheart argument, right?
that's where I was going to go next.
Not all
no.
the Scottish guys are supposed to be in kilts.
No,
in that
they
time
wouldn't have
period.
worn kilts at
Right.
all.
Right.
But doesn't it make it more Scottishy if they're wearing
Scottishy,
kilts?
that's not even a word.
It is
No,
now.
he's talking about a minor change, like
This is a
whether
minor-
we're using
Why does it matter
brown
if they're running
vests-
in pants or skirts? Why does it matter? It doesn't matter.
Well, there's a functional change there, and one is that Fela or whatever it was is a blanket that you wrapped around yourself, and they were actually wearing pants. But what you're talking about is a minor change,
You're
like
right.
the long land pattern brown vest versus the short land pattern brown vest, which in storytelling is going to have, and even aesthetics, unless you measure the barrels,
Right.
you're not going to know.
So this is where I'm coming down is because another example I'm Saving Private Ryan is the tank in that battle actually isn't a Tiger. It's a
well, they don't have any more.
it's a Russian.
We blew
it's
them all up.
Yeah, it's a Russian modified tank. But if what I'm saying though is if you are a subject matter expert for that period, right, and you see those things, you're really going to notice them. And a great example is me and Greg are giant armor nerds and have been for a long time. And when he watches Rome, the armor is wrong for the time period.
Oh, they're all wearing the Lorca segmentata,
Right,
or
and it
whatever
doesn't
is. Yeah.
exist in
Yeah.
that time period. And it really bothers him.
See, now there's
But
such
it
a
doesn't
thing-
bother me.
No, it doesn't bother me either because I have adamantium disbelief suspenders. I can suspend. Okay, as long as your world is consistent, I can suspend my belief in nearly anything. I
Kilts
can.
are just too much, except for that. Huh?
The what?
The kilts are just too much.
The kilts just throw me over
Okay,
the edge.
the kilts, I will be
it's
honest,
not even functional.
They bothered me because I knew like they don't at that time period they're not wearing kilts and no one goes to war in a skirt in that time period because no one's shooting like you got to run at them, and leg armor is pretty cool.
If you've
'cause it
ever
works.
worn a Scottish great kilt, you know how non-functional they are to
Yeah.
move around in.
And the other thing is though
But for dramatic effect.
that's where I realized why because in reality it's kind of hard to distinguish the two armies if they're both wearing pants. Because they're both like, well, I mean, newsflash, the
like
locations aren't that far apart.
It's the same reason
You
that the
know?
key actors don't wear helmets, right?
Well, that's also true.
Well, yeah, because it would make sense in the.
Now,
yeah.
I will tell you what does bother me in Braveheart is there is a vambrace, which is the piece of armor that goes across your forearm that Mel Gibson wears at one point, and it has arrowheads sticking out of it like he's going to smash somebody in the face with it. And I lost my mind when I saw that because I think that's way, way over, right?
I, on the other hand, did not even notice.
Well, I notice armor because I make and collect armor and whatever. There's another piece
Yeah.
of armor where they have it's stainless steel washers that are lashed to a vambrace and it looks terrible.
No.
Yeah, really, really bothers me. Now those things I did notice and they do bother me.
It's all about frame of reference. If all of your players are the social studies department, the more details you can add in as a GM about the appropriate time period is going to make the game click better for them.
Mm-hmm.
But if Lacey doesn't know anything about history,
That's not fair.
not
I'm
even gonna
very
know
well
those
versed in the Tigris and Euphrates.
Only because you get it drilled into you 6 times. But so I thought it was interesting because there are certain things that bother me a lot and then others that don't. And I kind of wondered with your guys' backgrounds, if there are things that bother you. Because I'll give you an example. We played a game where there was a Victorian game or something that I was running that was in London. And you were talking about things that were going on and happening there. And I could tell that when you spoke about them, it was important to you and you were passionate about it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like by you talking about, like, cause you've been to London and all these different places, when
Okay.
and there was,
Oh, was that the vampire game where I died?
No, that was my game.
Oh, that was your
that
game.
was a
Yeah.
restoration era
there,
New Orleans.
I could tell by the way you talked about it and brought things up that it was important to you. And while I knew enough at that point when I was running that game to kind of muddle my way through, but there's no way I was an expert in any of that time period. I just kind of, glanced over some things and, I was going for more of the feel and the themes of it. But when I saw you talking about it and how much it excited you, I was like, oh, I need to kind of shift gears and make sure I really kind of have some of these pieces down because there were pieces of knowledge that you had that I clearly didn't have any of. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't jar you too much with something that was going to be terribly wrong that I didn't even know about.
See, I'm not looking for that. What I'm looking for, I don't know about Carrie, is internal consistency. I mean, that's the thing that's important to me is that if you've established something like there's Zeppelins in 1890s London that dock frequently at Wimbledon Aerodrome, I'm cool with that as long as they always do that. If it's something that you've established, like, I don't know, there's like spaceships that dock in Boston Common. That's weird. But as long as that's a regular feature and we understand how that works, that's cool with me. Because we're all going to have slightly different takes, and like we could sit here and have philosophical and historical arguments about the finer points from here till the end of time. But at least for me, I'm old school enough to where if the GM says it's so, I'm good with that as long as it's that way all the time.
See, and I used to get hung up on that sort of thing because I'd come into game and you'd tell me it was in the Dark Ages, and so I'd have like 3 or 4 female concepts that could legitimately adventure, and I'd get really hung up because I knew that I played the other 2 earlier and I wanted to play this thing. And then you're like, it's role playing. Play what you want.
Now, so
and that's when it kind of clicked for me.
Here's the other thing I say when it comes to time periods with how you deal with women, because we played a tremendous amount of Dark Ages Vampire. Probably too much Dark Ages Vampire, if we're being completely
Like
honest.
I wasn't
had
there for
4
that, so.
concepts
But-
that
There was not
worked
too
for an
much.
adventuring woman.
I will agree. But here's my conceit with that, and this is what I say to everybody that ever asks my opinion on it, is that you have to be able to everyone makes certain concessions when you make a character in a game, right?
Yeah.
And every culture has a Joan of Arc. There's the story of the Valkyries with the Vikings. Every culture has those outliers, right? And of women that didn't conform to gender norms, right?
Yeah.
At the time. Well, when you're making a character, I really, really hope that you're trying to not make someone who is the most or the least exceptional conforming person to make. You're making a character who's a hero who's going to go do things and in fact change in the world. And I mean, if you're just average Joe, well, I don't want to play average Joe the RPG. That's kind of my life. You know?
I was just gonna say, if I want to do like cubicles and accountants, I can go to work. Yeah.
So that was where I came from for those games. It's like when it came to the NPCs that you interacted with and the world, I tried to make sure that I had those cultural things there because I think it's important to the world. But when it came to the character that existed, I think it's important to realize that you're playing the exceptions and the outliers in the world, not.
Well, plus not to mention, now, for those of you who are listening, you may not know this, but I'm a middle-aged white guy, okay? So as a middle-aged white guy, my understanding is there's a lot of people in this world that go through a lot of poop, okay? Now, my understanding, now correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you sit down for some escapism, you don't want to deal with the same poop that actually exists. You want to go cut the heads off some dragons or do whatever the heck it is we're here to do.
Right. Well, that's why it's called a game and escapism.
That's why it's called a game and escapism. Like I was designing one for some folks from work. It just happens to be a bunch of ladies. Now, if they're going to be shield maidens from Rohan, now they might get some friction from here and there, but that friction is there so they can cut the heads off of the bad guys.
Well, it serves a purpose.
Feel good about it.
It's a story
That
purpose.
brings to a good point that actually lines up with this. So you run this game for a bunch of people that you work with, and they're all English majors. And you tie in a lot of English references to make the game better for them.
I got to bring my game up.
Does a person that runs a historical game for a bunch of history people have to make it realer? Because you make your game realer for those literature people.
I feel like maybe I have a relevant opinion there. So I don't know about
Lacey,
you,
please.
since you're not an English major, but I am clearly not a history major. And I find that running historical-based games is incredibly intimidating because I don't know what is going on. And so when I ran the vampire game that you were actually, I can tell you enjoyed it because you get excited every time you talk about it.
Oh,
right?
I was slaughtered.
So it was a post-Civil War restoration game set in New Orleans, and I did what is for me a ridiculous amount of research for
I have to say I was suitably impressed. I'm like, she knows what the 1860s like New Orleans is like. I was like,
So was there anything when you were playing that game where you got frustrated about my lack of historical expertise?
absolutely not, because I just took everything you said as truth. Now, whether it was actually that way or not, I don't really care, because my character's being hunted by vampires in an insane asylum, and I really don't care right now about what the sewer system was like. If you say it was complicated and all this sort of stuff, I'm all about that. Okay, whatever you say is true about that setting, because you kept the spirit of what you knew enough to be dangerous, and you knew enough to actually launch with it. That's all you need to know.
And you weren't involved, but I actually used that exact same setting and game and your guys' characters and ran a vampire game for Lee and Carrie and James in the exact same world, place, and time.
Mind blown.
Yes. So, what did you guys think about? I know we didn't play as many sessions of that. We only played like 1 or 2, but do you even remember it?
Yeah, I do.
Totally.
I tried to get into a carriage. It backfired.
She was playing a communist.
Yes, it was terribly trying. Gary was
You
like
did
that
that
one
on
person that
purpose,
just like
didn't
would
you?
not
She
fit
was a
in the
Bruja
card.
communist,
It was
yeah.
like square peg
It was
circle
good.
hole.
It was good.
Yeah, I didn't fit. Do you get upset when my nursing skill is really bad in games? Because I can't really figure
I don't
out
remember
how to
you
do it.
ever playing a
I
nurse.
tried once. It felt really, really
Okay,
simple.
I
so-
remember you playing a healer, but there was magic in that system, so it's not like the same thing.
So let me-
Now I find Kurt tends to play doctors a lot, and his medical jargon nowhere close. But I find it absolutely amazing because he drops it with such confidence that it is inarguable.
The confidence of a
And I
doctor who
love
is
it.
never
It
wrong.
is
That's how he
fantastic.
drops
It is
it.
fantastic. I would be
Oh, I
so
was going to
sad if
ask
he
you
quit
with
playing
mashed
doctors.
and that sort of thing because I would just drop. So we got the fistula and the south hematoma. We're going to have to put a clamp on that and
here's the
definitely
thing,
get
though.
3 units.
In
Great.
that,
it's great. It's ridiculous nonsense, and I
Yeah.
acknowledge that, and then I'm like, "This is fantastic," and I move on.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because
I don't know
I
what I'm
think it
talking
would bother me if we were really down in the minutia of it. That meatball surgery kind of thing from MASH in the
Yeah.
Korean War, it's more making sure the feel is right as opposed because we're not actually going into any detail to be like, all right, well, his descending aorta, and the impact of the explosion.
I just applied the
know-
Star Trek technobabble
Right.
principle, and I'm like, so you're
So-
supposed to be playing a doctor, so I should say things with confidence and very rapidly.
Right, and it was close enough to make it work, which I guess is where I was coming from with the Saving Private Ryan reference with the rifle, in that it's good enough to pass pass the
Pass muster.
or the sniff test or whatever.
That was a military
yeah.
thing reference. I don't
So-
know if that's accurate, but that's
I guess what I'm trying to drill down more on though is when is it not when does it become an issue at that point then?
When you're running the game for a classroom full of students that are learning about it.
Oh, if it's relevant to the plot, like if you're doing if you're doing a Revolutionary War thing, General Howe can never be on the American side because that's really going to screw him up when the SAT comes around. No, I mean
Right, yeah,
seriously,
yeah, I hear you,
that's
I
just
hear
going to
you.
be a thing. The British can't ever win Yorktown. Okay, it just can't happen that way, or however.
And it's an issue if you don't stay consistent. Because all of us have kind of agreed that it doesn't matter if you mess it up as long as it's true in your world. But if you keep messing it up on me, then it's an issue.
I feel like it might be an issue if everyone can already see the betrayal coming. If you're fighting in a revolutionary game, Benedict Arnold is going to turn coat. He's already fighting for the British. Something has gone wrong.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's take that as a great example.
So, like an issue if it works against the players.
For those of you
Right,
that
like,
don't
we all
know
have
that
muskets,
may
I'm
not be
shooting
from
at
the
you.
U.S., Benedict
You call it a
Arnold.
grenade launcher.
Benedict Arnold has this huge betrayal of the Americans to the British.
It's not a betrayal because he was a British subject to begin with.
As you said, debating back and forth earlier, but
He was a traitor when he said he was for the colonials who were in revolution against their
But
king.
he wasn't really betraying them. He was faking.
okay. So here's my
Sedition
question,
Act.
though.
It feels morally bad because we
When
won.
I don't want more of my game.
yeah, you do.
He sold out.
That's
the
why you
people
play
he
World
was-
of Darkness.
He said he was supporting.
Okay, so
That's
there's
still a
that.
betrayal.
That's
Okay, so
okay.
let me ask you this: everybody around with a smattering of American history class, right, or who took the Constitution test, knows about Benedict Arnold, right, and his betrayal. So, is it too much of a departure if you just say that Benedict Arnold in your game, in our Colonial Gothic game, Benedict Arnold never betrays the British, and in fact, he becomes a colonial equivalent of a 5-star general for the
Second
Revolutionary
president of the
Armory?
United States.
Yeah, is that a
I
huge
think
issue?
you can only do that if you say you're playing an alternate history game.
Yeah, I would say point of departure. Like when we do any game that's set in a world that has a canon, and I would call the history text, one of those canons.
That's a great way to refer to it.
Okay, so we have the canon of actual history. As long as we say this is a point of departure, anything the characters do from here on out can affect the world.
Right.
I think it would actually be very interesting to do those things on purpose if you were playing a time travel game. So then you're like creating paradoxes, but your players think that they're playing in a real history game, but really they're playing in an alternate history game, and then this sort of thing pops up, and then that would be abundantly okay and somewhat awesome.
I've been thinking about this for the better part of 2 months now, and there's
Somebody's doing too much.
I thought about the episode, and then I was waiting for you guys to get. I was waiting for you guys to be able to get here to record it because I wanted to have the different perspectives that we have here now to be able to have a relevant discussion about it or whatever. And I thought it would be fun to have a time travel game where you took those weird moments in history and had to make them happen.
Okay.
You know, and it's just something that I thought might be interesting and fun because there's loads throughout history of
manipulation.
of weird moments where like just stuff happened. It's like, wow, that should have never happened, but it did. You know,
And it's one of those things where again,
Dunkirk
what's that? What's that?
should have never happened.
Oh, Dunkirk.
Well, I mean, it should have
Wait,
because
wait.
we're on the good side.
Stop. What is the miracle of Dunkirk?
When the British Expeditionary Force manages to get off of
the
the beaches without getting slaughtered by
With
the
the
Nazi
French
army
troops?
with the French and everyone else because of the
Is this like the Normandy
Because
thing?
Hitler
Oh
calls
my
off.
gosh.
Is
He
it different
just doesn't
beach?
make an order to attack. No, so Germany takes over France, and all of our soldiers are at the only port that is not controlled by not our soldiers. It's French and English soldiers.
The
They're
good
at the only
guys.
port that isn't taken over by the Nazis yet, and they managed to evacuate in 4 days, leaving behind all their supplies.
There
They
was a
still managed to
movie.
Evacuate.
yeah, they commandeered
called?
every
Miracle
Dunkirk.
Oh, I don't
Dunkirk,
know.
yeah. They commandeered every
heard of it.
fishing vessel, every seaworthy boat they
Exactly.
commandeered to send them to go pick up the soldiers to try and bring them back to the
And Hitler
English
just never made
mainland.
an order, and
That's
they weren't
cool.
sure why. They still don't know why he didn't make
Yeah.
an order. They have
Meth.
no clue.
Maybe he got
Meth.
buried
No,
in
that
his
wasn't
email.
around yet. No,
Yes, it was.
Let's say that maybe he was trying.
I just
to
had a
keep the English from
small,
hating
just a
him.
piece of me just died.
Methamphetamine was around in World War II.
Oh, okay.
It actually was.
Okay.
And
Shouldn't he have been hypervigilant then?
I just
yeah, that's why towards the end he kind of goes a little crazier. They think is one of the reasons.
crazier than he was. Wow.
They also gave it too much.
Homicidal maniac.
That's one of the
Genocidal
reasons.
maniac.
One of the things that they gave a lot of the kamikaze
The
pilots
only
as
thing
well.
worse than a homicidal maniac is a
methamphetamine.
manic homicidal
really
maniac.
cool
See,
Who goes
historical
genocidal?
inaccuracy that I just made.
Well, but see, there's a weird. We have a weird relationship to history and drugs, but how they don't want to acknowledge certain things and don't want to call certain things drugs, but you want to call them medications. But there's a really cool documentary about the history of like drugs in before they became illegal.
But somehow
Yeah, it's
opium
pretty-
dens are okay to talk about.
Wow.
Well, because they find their way into Victorian literature, tons. Lee can tell you, I'm sure, all about opium dens in Victorian literature.
Sorry,
Okay.
for the side history.
So can
So-
Edgar Allan Poe.
I went to Half Price Books as
worthy
I am
hobby.
want to do, and I
I would be broke.
was
if I
looking
was closer.
for different things for the Colonial Gothic game and some just different time period books and things. And I came across this, which is where that's the actual game book.
Oh,
I found
like,
this.
wow, it actually says
It's
colonial.
called it's a Writer's Digest book. It's the Writer's Guide to Everyday Life in Colonial America from
That's
1607 to 1783. Now, something what I was going to go with this is
Is that the dates for the colonial era? 1783? That seems like a long way out, no?
Okay, so the Treaty of
Or
Paris,
not
you may
far
have heard of
enough out.
this?
Wait, I thought colonial America was like, never mind. I'm gonna
Wait,
sound
the Treaty
dumb.
of Paris, it ended the war for independence that we fought. Oh my
Okay.
Wait,
gosh.
isn't the revolution? No, not revolutionary. Sorry.
1776 to 1783, and then there's the Confederation, and then
but I
there's
thought
the
Civil War
Constitution.
America isn't in. Well, I guess it doesn't make any sense because we're not colonies anymore. Oh,
I'm judging just a little bit right now.
I'm
Okay.
not.
I thought
So-
you were going to have a problem with the colonial era, which is different from colonial America because Europe was still colonizing Africa.
I'm
for
not
a
making any
century.
distinctions between the two.
so what I like about this is it's written like an almanac, and it's got
Yeah.
it's not. I don't have to sort through 15 paragraphs of prose to learn 6 relevant facts. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's actually good for this situation.
Yeah, that's
because the period before 1660 is completely different from the period afterwards, and that whole
Right.
18th century experience is completely different yet again.
So I guess
Isn't there
what
like a Revolutionary War era too? Is that in
That's
the
part of the
colonial
colonial
era?
So
era.
on July 4th.
Is that only during the Revolutionary War?
Man, I'm not sure, Carrie. I'm not sure how to break this to her. You might
wait.
want to.
No, but I have
We're
a serious
no longer a colony
question.
of Britain.
Is that only during the Revolutionary War? There's no like a couple years after or a couple years before that falls in that time period.
I think it depends on who you ask, because if you ask people in the UK, they're probably like, no, they were a colony for a little bit longer than we actually were, versus us being like,
Well, I mean,
So-
there's like a whole war thing,
Well,
but then they write the thing
she's
beforehand.
legit in the fact that they probably didn't really recognize us as independent states until after we beat them the second time, in 1812.
No, there is the Treaty of Paris, right? 1783, which recognizes 13 independent states who are together in a confederation, right? Who find that for whatever reason didn't work for them, and they wrote a constitution, which was okay. Class quiz: who remembers what year that was? Constitution. Got one right now.
1783.
That was with the Articles of Confederation. Carrie, come
Oh,
on, help me out here. Put your hand up.
I'm drawing pictures instead.
My God, it's just like
1780.
actually 9.
Oh, so close.
Okay, that's actually better. Okay, Why do I feel like I'm back in
I
this
said
history classroom?
1783.
This is a super cool resource that I thought was pretty awesome. So if you were
2
going
points for
to
Lee, by the way.
run a historical game of some kind, what are the other resources that are out there that are easy to find that have...
PBS's Colonial House. Okay, that is a great thing to do, just because it talks about the very early colonial state.
No, but I'm talking about just colonial time. I'm talking about like if you were to look to run games at any time, whether it's World War II or World War I or
Well, it all
colonial.
depends what you're looking for, because like Colonial Williamsburg, if you just want like
So I guess is there a singular like company that puts out stuff that's like almanac style?
I don't know, Wikipedia.
Well, no, I've gone to Wikipedia, and then you go to their sources. That's actually a really
you
good way
mine
to
it
go.
for sources.
Yeah.
But like if we're talking Colonial Gothic, the Colonial Williamsburg site, great. They've watered it down so you can get a good idea how it feels. Read novels like what is it, Fever 1793? That's a good one.
Pilgrim's Progress.
Easy one.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, just
How about
about.
the Scarlet Letter? Is that too late?
But
well,
no, I guess
that's a fictionalized account of.
I find
Like
TV
Pilgrim's
shows
Progress.
Doesn't
like
feel that
Netflix and Stars all have shows that work.
I guess if you were to run a historical game and you didn't have any base to start with, like what resources would you use to go try and besides Wikipedia, because everybody knows Wikipedia,
Yeah.
obviously. But like, are there any other things that spring to mind? Because I don't want to focus on one time period because
I really don't know, because they're all going to be different, aren't they?
Yeah, but for me, it's just a TV show or a movie. Most books, gaming books, point you to a direction on where to get your inspiration for what the time period's like. Hey, read this poem. Hey, watch this TV show.
I will say Colonial Gothic has a tremendous amount of sources in it. It's just really, really well researched. It's really well
yeah.
put together.
I
but
have something
what?
that
Really?
podcasters might like.
You have something, a historical reference?
Yeah, believe it or not. So, Audible, okay, the audiobook company.
You may have heard of them, yeah.
You may have heard of them,
Or seen
right?
their ads.
They, you can buy with your credits great courses, and they have periods of history. I actually listened to part of one on the Restoration the Restoration era, and it was somewhat interesting, and more interesting than any history class I ever took anyway. So
Well, yeah, I mean,
that's
like if you're
something.
already invested enough to want to run the game in the period, it's probably easier to
Yeah.
consume that. I didn't even think about the podcast thing because there's lots of great history podcasts that are out there
I
to
might
use.
also suggest
Drunk history?
nonfiction writing. If you're talking about the late colonial era, maybe you should read The Wealth of Nations. Kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Yeah, but that's really dull. I mean, let's be honest. I've read that thing, and it is like,
What's the thing is like some
like
of the stuff you
pulling
got to
teeth,
consume.
man.
It's terrible, which is why I like this almanac form because I can just flip through and be like,
Heck
okay,
yeah.
clothes, food, populations, whatever.
Well,
Thinking
actually-
along the
Watch
lines
a
of
TV
like
show, watch a
sentence
movie.
structure.
TV.
But
Nothing
so
says
many-
nothing says Victorian era like John Stuart Mill and his 3-paragraph sentences.
But no
But
one wants
even
to
like
read that
not
though.
period pieces, like if you look up books that are set in the time period that you want to read that are historical fiction, it's basically somebody who already knows the time period, has already done the research, and has written an interesting story to read in
But
that
some of
time
them
period.
get it so terribly wrong, though, which is where I was kind of
not
trying
all
to
of
figure
them.
out. Yeah, but you got to be able to make sure that you can find the right
See,
one.
I don't know. See, I'm going to take the tack you took a while ago, which as long as it's internally consistent and everybody's having a good time, you roll with it.
I'm totally
I mean-
ready to run a changeling game in Victorian England right now.
I'm excited to be a part of
quite.
that.
Yeah, I'd want to be able to. See, again, you told me this. This is your fault. I'm putting this back on you, that you're going to be excited to play in the game the storyteller is going to be excited to tell.
Right.
I mean, I don't care if you don't know jack about what's going on. As long as you're internally consistent, I'll be on board. And a good player will be. Only a jerk is going to be like, no, that's not the way it really
Well,
was.
Right. Well, there are those people out there, and if you have that
the way
person,
I
then
see
tell them
it
to go
is-
away.
Tell them to shut up.
Unless
The
you're
first time they
short
get a
gamers,
shut
do
up.
Not tell them to
Earlier,
go away.
you were talking
scope
about a
them.
game that Kurt ran, and he in London, and he was really excited about the details, and you didn't know what they were.
Right.
But there's like a baseline awesome gaming. You know,
Yeah.
you're gaming, and so it doesn't matter what else happens. You're still gaming, and that's awesome. The extra details are.
See, I don't even remember
they-
that
they
game.
make
I just
it-
made
they
assumptions.
They make it better if you comprehend them, but they don't make it worse if you don't.
Right. Well,
I see it more as a GM problem,
Well,
where
that's what-
you
I
get
guess-
intimidated
Yeah.
running a game for people that know more about what
Well,
you're doing than you know
No,
about
that's-
what
and
you're
that- see,
doing.
that's where I kind of came down on it with was in that game. I just rolled with it because I'm more of a
Better.
veteran, but like my storytelling is I paint with broad strokes and then we
Yeah.
fill in the details in game. So it's easy for me to sort of roll with the punches and switch pieces around and move them where I need to be as I'm gaming and running
And
games.
plus, as a game master, you need to recognize the limits to your own knowledge. Like, if I'm going to run a hospital game, I'm going to call it General Hospital. Right. And it's not going to run like an actual hospital because I don't know how they run.
Right.
Okay?
I think it'll probably run just like an actual hospital.
So maybe it will. But see, that's just the thing. I don't know. So I'm going to
You
make
don't
it.
want to. That's the scary part.
Okay, work with me here. Work with me.
Right, I see what you're
Give
saying
me
now.
the confidence that
I
you
see
want
what you're
patients
saying.
to have.
Right.
And then I'm gonna run it. I'm gonna run it like a freaking soap opera because I've watched enough of those.
Well, that's-
we're just gonna put people in lab coats. Okay.
It really is a soap opera inside.
So there you go. Boom! I've got everything I need to
Right.
know. I'm gonna.
If you think Kevin is sleeping with Sally, he's probably sleeping
probably
with
sleeping with
Sally.
Sally.
And she's probably also sleeping with Dave.
Damn it, Dave.
I'm gonna talk about the dimethyltryptamine and how we don't have enough, and how you know what I mean. Just how it's gonna be.
I don't know. As a GM, ST, whatever you want to call it, in a group of people that have all been doing it longer than me, I was always like very intimidated. So I would usually read a fiction book set in that area, maybe watch a show, and then do some quick research, whether it be on Wikipedia. Sorry about that.
Sounds
Or
good.
in a history book that I have lying around at home. Just something quick. But usually I read a story first. That way I had something to base my story off of. So I had a hook, something to twist you guys around with, and cross my fingers you guys hadn't read it too.
This is a good plan. This is a good plan. As long as your players if your players aren't jerks, I can't help you.
No, then
You
I
need
can
new
help
friends.
Tell them to go away.
Yeah, you need some new friends.
Also, that being said, I know that when James ran a Dark Ages game, he knew more about the Dark Ages than me, despite my background. And I was still going to college when you were running those games. I would read a lot about Dark Ages before I got to your house. Or when you ran the 7th
I'm sorry, I
game,
didn't realize
I was
you do that.
intimidated. I was like, "Oh my god, I'm going to school for histoy, and this dude knows more than me. I gotta
This
prepare."
dude.
So
Oh, that is
also,
so
when you ran
weird.
the
When
7th
James
season-
runs those games, I sit down and I'm like, today I'm going to be a pirate, yo! My only prep was like, I need a glass of rum before we start.
Eye patch, maybe.
Lee and I started watching the shows.
Black Sails.
Black
Sails.
Sails, because I was like, I don't think I'm role playing a pirate right. So I
Although
get really
James
anxious
could wear an eye
sometimes.
patch, legitimately.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you guys have to say about this, or we've beaten this one to death enough, do you think?
Very close. I would just kind of add at the end that, as we've said a million times, setting expectations at the beginning, making sure your people you're playing with aren't jerks, and if they are, you need some new friends because they're not going to harass you.
No,
as
you don't
GM.
need to game with friends. You need to game with people who aren't jerks.
Or people you don't know.
Okay, I'm giving the mind blown look right now because I would think that would be the case, but I don't know.
Hey, whatever works, right?
My final thoughts came at minute 65.
As you guys know, we are a member of the Gonna Geek Network, so quick plug for In Defense of, episode 44, when Harold met Spolin. Yes, and joined by players past and present, we look at the unpredictable yet strangely organized world of improv comedy. And you can find them on the Gonna Geek Network, and that is In Defense of. That'll do it for us this week. As always, you guys can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/justonemorefix. You can follow us on Twitter at justonemorefix. But the best way you can support us is by going to wherever it is you find our podcast at, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else that it's listed that I don't know about, and give us a rating and comment and try and help spread the word about us and how
Much we don't suck, and you should play more games.
true story, play more games.
Okay.
Right on.
We're going to do right now.
True story. I guess final announcement, one quick plug is that we are going to head downstairs now to hopefully record an actual play of 10 Candles.
Sweet.
And it should be pretty awesome. It's a horror tragedy game, so it should be pretty good because we like horror a lot. I think this is
Spoiler
a
alert.
good group of people around. No, you guys will know it's a horror tragedy game.
I know, we're all gonna die.
Oh, yeah. Terrible death.
Said spoiler
Terrible death.
alert.
Wait a minute, so
We're all
it's
gonna
kind
die.
of real
You're all
life?
going to die. I'm going to make it out.
You're not.
You're the plucky survivor who wears a bandana.
Sad day. I hate to break this to you. No.
Do we
Right.
know we're doomed in that game?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll lay it all out here in a little bit. So that should be coming out to you guys pretty soon. It will go to the Patreon backers first, and they will get the first look at it. And whenever it fits into our release schedule, we'll get it out to you guys. So look forward to that. And as always, we will see you guys next week.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can find us at justonemorefix.com and follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.